I wasn't supposed to be there that late. The shop had already gone quiet, the kind of quiet that hums against your ears and makes you aware of your own breathing. Fluorescent lights flickered, and the scent of oil and wet pavement hung in the air. I was elbow deep in the engine of a car that hadn't run right in months, pretending I knew what I was doing. That's when she walked in. Not with the kind of entrance movies give people. No slow motion, no music. Just the low creak of the door and a gust of cold night air that carried the faintest trace of perfume. Clean, sharp, a little sad. She stood there for a moment, taking in the half-lit room, her hand still on the door handle. "You're open?" she asked. Her voice was calm, deliberate, the kind that doesn't need to raise itself to be heard. "Not really," I said, wiping grease from my fingers onto a rag. "But I guess I am now." She smiled, just slightly, like she'd been expecting that answer. Her coat was still buttoned, and her hair was damp, probably from the drizzle outside. There was something about the way she stood, poised, not nervous, but not fully at ease either. "I just need someone to look at my car," she said. "It's making this sound." People always say sound when they mean they don't know what's wrong. But the way she said it, I believed her, like the sound wasn't mechanical but personal. I took her keys, and when our fingers brushed, she didn't pull back right away. Just a second too long, enough for something small to flicker in my chest, quick and quiet. Her car was parked crooked under the streetlight. Old silver sedan, spotless inside except for a paperback on the passenger seat. The Years by Annie Ernaux. I noticed it because the cover was creased, like she'd read it more than once. As I worked, she stayed nearby, leaning against the doorframe, watching. Not in that impatient customer way, more like she wanted to understand what I was doing. Every now and then, I'd catch her eyes following my hands, and I'd pretend not to notice. "You're young," she said finally, after a stretch of silence. I looked up. "That's not a crime, is it?" Her lips curved again. "Not yet." There was a small pause, the kind that lingers just long enough to turn into something else if you're not careful. She looked away first, her gaze sliding toward the rain streaking the window. "Sorry," she said. "That sounded strange." "It's fine," I said. "You're not the first person to say something strange here." She laughed softly, not the kind of laugh that fills a room, but the kind that slips out despite trying to hold it in. Then she did something small, but it changed everything. She took the rag from my hand, folded it neatly, and set it aside like it mattered. "Mess makes me anxious," she murmured. I wanted to ask why. I didn't. The car wasn't fixed that night. I told her I'd need to look at it again in the morning, and she nodded, like she already knew I would say that. When she handed me her number, she said it in that same calm tone, practical, detached. But as she turned to leave, she hesitated at the door and said quietly, without facing me, "You'll hate me one day." I don't know why I answered the way I did. Maybe it was the hour, maybe the silence. "Then I'll hate myself too," I said. She didn't look back, just pushed the door open, and the cold air followed her out. I stood there long after she left, staring at the rag she'd folded, still warm from her hands. And for reasons I couldn't name, I knew I'd think about that moment every time I smelled rain on metal. The next morning, she came back, earlier than I expected. The sky was still pale, the kind of washed-out gray that makes everything look like it's underwater. I hadn't even opened the front gate yet. She stood there in that same long coat, holding a paper cup of coffee and a small paper bag. "Peace offering," she said, raising it a little, "for keeping the shop open last night." Inside the bag was a croissant, still warm. "I don't usually eat breakfast," I said. "Then make this an exception." There was something effortless about the way she spoke, like she'd already decided what my answer would be. I took it, even though I wasn't hungry. She watched me unwrap it, eyes soft but unreadable. Her car was still parked where she left it, water beading along the hood. I bent to check under it again, pretending to focus while stealing glances at her reflection in the glass. She looked tired, not in the way people do when they've missed sleep, but in that deeper, quieter way that lives behind the eyes. "Rough morning?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Rough decade." Then she caught herself, brushed a hand through her hair, and added quickly, "Sorry." That came out darker than I meant. "It's fine," I said, tightening a bolt that didn't need tightening. Everyone's got their version of a bad decade. She gave me a look then, small, but searching. How old are you again? 26. Her brows lifted slightly. You say that like it's supposed to mean something. I shrugged. You asked. Silence settled between us again, except for the low hum of the shop fan. She leaned against the car, her arms crossed loosely, the coffee cooling in her hand. Her nails were short, unpainted. The kind of detail most people wouldn't notice, but I did. They told me more than words could. She didn't have the energy to care about appearances anymore, or maybe she was past pretending. When I wiped my hands and stood, she was staring out the open door at the street. You know, she said, sometimes I wonder if people ever stop pretending they know what they're doing. I hesitated before answering. If they do, I haven't met them. That made her laugh, quietly, briefly. And for a second, her face softened, all the guardedness slipping away. It wasn't beauty that struck me, not exactly. It was the weight she carried so carefully that you almost didn't see it until she forgot to hold it up. The light shifted. Her shadow stretched long across the floor. You don't talk much, she said after a while. I say enough, I replied. Maybe that's why it's hard to stop listening. That silence again, thick, full of things that shouldn't be said out loud. When she turned to leave, she set the empty coffee cup on the counter and paused. You shouldn't be kind to me, she murmured. It'll make things harder later. I didn't ask what she meant. I just nodded, and she gave a small, knowing smile, the kind that both warns and invites. After she left, I noticed she'd left her book on the passenger seat. The same one, The Years. I told myself I'd call to tell her. But I didn't. Not yet. I just stood there, tracing the creases on the cover, wondering how a person could look so composed while holding so much undone inside them. And somewhere between the quiet and the smell of coffee cooling on the counter, I realized I was already in too deep. It was a Thursday night, the kind that feels like it shouldn't exist, too quiet to be midweek, too heavy to be calm. The rain hadn't stopped in 2 days, and the power in half the street was out. She texted me first. The lights are gone again. Can't even boil water. I don't know why I drove over. Maybe because I still had her book on the passenger seat. Maybe because she'd never asked for anything before. Her apartment was above a small tailor shop, narrow stairs, the faint smell of starch and old fabric. When she opened the door, candlelight flickered behind her, painting the walls gold and soft. You didn't have to come, she said, voice low but not unkind. I brought your book. She smiled faintly. You could have waited until daylight. I don't sleep much lately. She hesitated, then stepped aside. Then come in. The place was small, tidy in that quiet, lived-in way. A kettle sat and used on the counter. The power outage had turned everything into a muted version of itself. Her shadow stretched across the wall as she lit another candle. You want tea? She asked. It's cold, but that's fine. She poured, careful, steady hands. I noticed the way her sleeve slipped back slightly, revealing a faint scar along her wrist. I looked away before she noticed me noticing. We sat at the small table, the candle between us bending the light across her face. I told myself to look at anything else, the cracked mug, the rain on the window, the crooked picture frame behind her. But I didn't. She met my eyes once, briefly, and looked down. You shouldn't keep showing up like this, she murmured. People will talk. I don't care what people say. She gave a quiet laugh. You will. Eventually. Then let that be later. There was something reckless in the air, not passion, not yet, just the sense that both of us were standing too close to a line we couldn't name. Her phone buzzed on the table. She froze. The screen lit up with a name she didn't want me to see. Her hand trembled slightly as she silenced it. I didn't ask who it was. She didn't explain. After a moment, she said softly, You ever try to build something normal out of pieces that don't fit anymore? Every day, I said. That made her look up again, and this time, she didn't look away. The air between us felt heavier, like something waiting to be acknowledged. The candle flickered out. Darkness folded in, sudden and complete. I heard her inhale sharply, then her hand brushed mine in the dark, not by accident this time. Neither of us moved. Her voice came barely above a whisper. You should go before it stops raining. But she didn't pull her hand back, and I didn't let go. A flash of lightning lit the room for a heartbeat. Her eyes, wide and unreadable, locked on mine. Then it was dark again. I stood up first, but my voice came out uneven. "You'll get your book back tomorrow." "You already brought it," she said. "I know." I left before she could say anything else. The rain hit harder as I stepped outside, but my hand still carried the warmth of hers, fragile, uninvited, unforgettable. And I knew it was only going to get harder to walk away next time. I hadn't seen her for a week. Not since the night of the candlelight, the rain, and the kind of silence that changes everything even when nothing happens. Then one afternoon she appeared at the shop again, sunlight in her hair for once instead of rain. She didn't say hello, just stood by the doorway, hands in her coat pockets, eyes fixed on the floor like she was still deciding whether to walk in or turn back. "You're early," I said quietly. She looked up, a faint smirk at the corner of her mouth. "You keep track of that?" "Only when you disappear." That earned a laugh, small but real. Then she crossed the room, stopping just close enough for me to smell that same clean, bittersweet perfume. "I shouldn't have called you that night," she said. "It wasn't fair." "You didn't call," I reminded her. "You texted." Her expression softened. "You came anyway." We stood there, the hum of the fluorescent lights the only thing cutting through the silence. She rested her palms on the counter, fingers tracing invisible lines across the surface. Her nails were shorter than before, bitten down, maybe. "I've been trying not to come here," she admitted. I swallowed hard. "And yet here you are." "I know." She exhaled, long and tired. That's the problem. Something in her tone, quiet, fractured, made me stop pretending I didn't understand what she meant. I wiped my hands on the rag, but there was no distraction strong enough for what hung between us now. "This," she said finally, gesturing vaguely between us. "Whatever this is, it isn't normal." I took a slow breath. I never said it was. She met my eyes. "Then what is it?" Her question sat there, too raw to answer. The world outside the shop seemed to fade. The noise of the street, the scent of motor oil, until there was only her voice and the sound of my own heartbeat, heavy and misplaced. I didn't speak. Neither did she. We just stared, long enough that it felt dangerous to breathe. Then she broke the silence, softer this time. "You remind me of someone I used to be kind to." "That sounds sad," I said. "It is." She turned slightly, her profile lit by the gray daylight. "You think you want to know someone like me? You don't. I ruin good things just by staying too long." I took a step closer before I could stop myself. "Then tell me to go." Her lips parted, but no sound came. Just a tremor in her jaw, a tiny shift of air between us. "I can't," she whispered. The room felt smaller then. I could hear the faint buzz of the lights, the creak of the door, her uneven breath. "I keep thinking," she said after a while, "if I push you away now, maybe it'll hurt less later. But it never works that way, does it?" "No," I said. "It doesn't." Her eyes glistened, though she didn't cry. She just stared at me, all that regret, exhaustion, and quiet longing swimming there like it had nowhere else to go. "Finally," she said, almost to herself, "you make me feel like I still have time. And that's cruel." I wanted to say something, anything, but my voice wouldn't come. So I just stood there, watching her turn toward the door, the sound of her heels soft against the concrete. She paused at the threshold, didn't look back, and said one last thing. "Whatever this is, it can't survive honesty." Then she left, and the silence she left behind felt louder than any confession. She showed up at the shop that evening carrying a small, weathered envelope. No explanation, no warning. Just held it in both hands like it weighed more than paper and ink. I need you to see this," she said quietly, her eyes refusing to meet mine. I hesitated. "Is it important?" Her shoulders tensed. "I don't know. Maybe. I just can't keep it." The envelope smelled faintly of old perfume, faintly of cedar. I took it from her, noticing her fingers linger on mine, just the merest brush. She didn't pull away, though her eyes flicked up for a fraction of a second, a flash of something unspoken. Inside was a folded photograph, a younger version of her, laughing in a sunlit park, arms around a man I didn't recognize at first. a smile that looked like it had never known regret. And then a letter, edges frayed, the handwriting precise but trembling in places. She said nothing as I read the first few lines. My stomach tightened with the weight of the words. Loss, love, mistakes she couldn't undo, a life interrupted. Finally, I looked up. You lost someone? Her gaze dropped. Yes, and I thought I'd learn how to move on. But her voice cracked slightly, the shield I'd seen before slipping for a moment. You make me feel things I shouldn't. I know it's foolish, and I know it's impossible, but I can't stop thinking about him, and now. She said nothing, letting the sentence dangle in the air, unfinished. I felt a strange responsibility, though it wasn't mine to carry. You're not him, I said softly. I know I can't be. But my words trailed. How do you comfort someone when the grief is theirs, not yours? But I can be here, if you want. Not as him. Not instead of him. Just here. Her hand, trembling, reached for mine. She didn't take it immediately. Just hovered above, indecisive, hesitant. The conflict was written all over her posture, her tight shoulders, the way she bit her lower lip. I shouldn't, she whispered. I shouldn't feel this for anyone. Especially not now. You already do, I said. Whether you like it or not. Her laugh was bitter, almost self-directed. Then she looked away, out the front window at the street lights, smeared by rain. You remind me too much of him, she said, voice low. The way you watch, the way you care without asking. It's unfair. Maybe I'm just lucky, I muttered. Or maybe I just see you. Her lips parted slightly, a breath held too long, and for a second, I thought she might lean forward. Her fingers hovered again, so close to mine that I could feel the warmth. But the moment broke with the soft creak of the shop door. Neither of us moved immediately, but in that split second, something seismic had already shifted. She exhaled through her nose, a sound half relief, half resignation. I'll take it home, she said, finally lifting the envelope. You don't have to do it alone, I said, but it wasn't a demand. Just a quiet offering. Her gaze lingered on mine, hesitant, fragile. Then she nodded, the smallest inclination of trust. And as she walked toward the door, the photograph and letter clutched close to her chest, I realized that even a quiet confession could rearrange everything. Without a word about us, without a single touch, the ground beneath both of us had already shifted. I didn't see it coming, not exactly. It was another late evening at the shop, the fluorescent lights humming softly, the rain now just a quiet drizzle outside. She arrived without warning, coat damp, hair curling at the ends. No grand gesture, no dramatic confession. Just her. I can't keep pretending this is normal, she said as soon as she stepped inside, voice low, almost vulnerable. I nodded slowly. We don't have to pretend anymore. We didn't speak after that. The words had already done what they needed. She moved to the counter, setting down her umbrella, and I leaned against the hood of her car inside the garage. The space between us wasn't uncomfortable. It felt deliberate, like a fragile bridge just long enough to let both of us cross. Her hands were clasped loosely on the counter, fingers brushing the edge, absent-mindedly. I noticed the tremor when she let go to sip from a mug, the faintest sign of everything she'd held inside. You remind me of him, she said quietly, more to herself than me. I'm not him, I murmured. I know, she said, exhaling. And then, after a pause, but you make me feel like I might still be allowed to want things I lost. I didn't answer with words. I simply reached across the small gap between us and let my hand rest lightly over hers. She didn't pull away. Instead, she let it stay, her fingers settling against mine. A simple touch, but it carried all the weight of our history, our hesitations, and our truths. We sat like that for a long time, not speaking, not moving. The storm outside softened, leaving the rhythmic patter of rain as our only soundtrack. You make this feel inevitable, she whispered finally. I smiled without looking at her. Maybe some things can't be stopped. Her eyes softened, the walls around her expression finally lowering. She leaned slightly forward, forehead brushing mine for a moment so light it could have been imagined. But it wasn't imagined. I felt the pulse of her heartbeat, small and steady. There was no dramatic confession, no shouting, no tears, no frantic need. Just shared space, understanding, and the quiet acknowledgement of everything we hadn't allowed ourselves to feel until now. "You stay," she said, almost a question. "I'm not going anywhere," I replied. The rest of the world, the rain, the empty streets, even the past heartbreak, fell away. All that mattered was the steady warmth of her hand under mine, the simple closeness, the silence filled with everything neither of us had dared to say. Eventually, we didn't move. We didn't need to. The moment itself said everything. And in that quiet, unremarkable garage, love didn't roar. It simply existed, earned, gentle, undeniable. It's months later, and sometimes I still catch myself tracing the memory of that night, the quiet garage, the rain, her hand in mine. Life has moved forward, of course, but not like it usually does. Not flat, not predictable. She walks into a room differently now, still poised, still carrying that faint sadness in her eyes, but softer somehow, the kind of softness that comes from knowing someone will stay even when you try to push them away. And I've changed too. I've learned to listen without trying to fix, to wait without growing restless, to notice the small, silent things that mean more than words ever could. We don't have grand declarations. We don't need them. Love, I've learned, isn't always a rush of emotion. Sometimes it's just existing in the same space, quietly choosing each other over and over. She still folds her hands the way she did when nervous, still laughs softly when something strikes her as absurd, still leaves traces of her presence everywhere. A book on the counter, a scarf draped over a chair, the faintest trace of her perfume. I notice it all, and I notice myself noticing. That's the difference. There's no fairy tale ending, no perfect resolution. But there is honesty now. There's mutual understanding. There's the warmth of her hand brushing mine when she reaches across the table, the simple quiet of sitting together on a bench and letting the world spin past. That's enough. Sometimes I think about the letters, the photographs, the regrets she carried. And I think about the way I held back, the way I tried to understand without demanding anything in return. All of it led to this, fragile, earned, real. The best part is, we don't have to say much. A shared glance, a half smile, the slight touch of fingertips, those moments speak louder than any sentence ever could. And I can't imagine ever taking them for granted. We've both learned to live differently. Not recklessly, not perfectly, just fully, in ways we didn't think we could before. I guess that's what love does when it's earned slowly. It leaves you changed, quietly, in ways that aren't flashy but are undeniable. And somehow, improbably, it makes all the waiting, all the hesitation, all the nights of silence worth it. So here we are, still learning, still noticing, still choosing. And if you've ever wondered whether it's possible to feel this quietly, this deeply, even in the chaos of ordinary life, maybe it is. Because sometimes love doesn't shout. Sometimes it simply exists. And when it does, you notice everything.